Hey everyone, it's Inspector Talon, and today I want to talk about a topic that I've been seeing pop up a lot in Discord conversations, especially around SciCraft and some of my other peers. So the main thing that I've been seeing a lot is a desire to update Minecarts, hopefully sometime near in the future. And I wanted to make a video giving my thoughts and input on what I would want to see if Mojang were to decide to implement some changes, and also talk about what I like and what I would want to stay. A lot of the features that I'm about to suggest actually do have fixes for them in a mod that Tuno to Name and I developed, the Mended Minecarts mod. I'll link it in the description. But with all that out of the way, let's begin. So, first thing I would like to see is speed changes. Um, Minecarts currently are slow when it comes to long distance transportation, and that includes piston bolts, things that can bypass the normal rail speed limit, but all of those are still fairly slow and obsolete compared to other transportation methods like ice roads and elytras. Um, a really common suggestion I've seen is to implement some type of new rail, like a copper rail, and that increases the speed. I like that idea, spe- specifically because keeping the speed somewhat around where it is right now is good for actual redstone, but it's not good for long-term transportation. So in the Mini Minecarts mod, we have a way you can actually change the speed. So right now, this is the normal speed. If I change it, you'll see it goes a lot faster. And you can modify it for whatever value you want. However, there's not some additional rail to do that for you. Um, when it comes to tech, as I mentioned before, changing the speed outright to something this quick isn't necessarily very helpful. So, a speed that I would recommend would be 0. 0.5 blocks per tick or 10 blocks per second. Um, right now, it's currently at 0. 0.4 blocks per tick or 8 blocks per second. And if I place a cart on the rail, you'll see it requires some really weird repeater timings just to have a redstone signal travel with the cart. And that can be problematic if you are trying to make some tileable system or design that uses actual redstone timings instead of active cart detection. Um, and at 0.4 blocks per tick, it gets really awkward to make those redstone lines sync up. At 0. 0.5, you can have it where it's just a line of repeaters or comparators, observers. It's the same speed, and it gets much, much more consistent and easy to uh, do redstone with minecarts, even though you're not actually changing the speed that dramatically. Um, so when it comes to the speed, the two major changes I would recommend would be an addition of a new rail type, let's say a copper rail, uh, that increases the speed much faster than what the carts currently go. And then if they're not on copper rails, change the base speed to 0. 0.5 blocks per tick. That means long-term transportation and infrastructure is happy, and regular tech using minecarts is also improved. There is, however, a slight issue with just going in and changing the speed directly, um, and that has to do with minecart derailing. This is actually a problem even now in current versions because on curved rails, sometimes in farms you can get an unlucky circumstance where carts collide when they're going along curves such as this, and then the cart will just derail from the line. And I've seen it a couple times, and people get really confused, understandably, because it doesn't really make sense for it to just go off the rail. Um, at zero point 0.4 blocks per second, or blocks per tick rather, it's as it is currently, it's rather uncommon. But even if it's at zero point 0.5 blocks per tick, it's really common. In fact, it happens almost every time, which would provide a pretty reasonable explanation why Mojang would make it such an awkward number in the first place, but it is a a fixable problem. So I can quickly demonstrate at 8 blocks per second. It's normal as you would expect. And if I change it to 0.5, if I change it to 0.5, give it a little bit more speed, you'll see it derails. Just flies right off the rail line. Now, thankfully, Minecarts has a fix for this as well. And now it won't derail, but this shouldn't really be an issue in the first place. So this should be something that is fixed, and if this gets fixed, it gets way easier to address the issues with speed. So another really big problem right now is the vanilla renderer for the minecart. So in vanilla, currently the place where the minecart is shown to the player client side is wildly different than where it is server side. This blue box is where it is server side, and right now it syncs up because I'm using the Minecarts mod to make it render accurately. But if I turn it off, you'll see that blue box and the minecart get really desynced. I could do it on a straight rail to show as well. It's really far out of alignment. So far, in fact, that you might as well be playing blind when trying to do tech with this. It's really far off. If I place a card here and show the slime, you'll see the actual minecart itself doesn't bounce. It it should bounce. You see that blue box bounces, but it doesn't. If I quickly turn back, if I turn that back on, you'll see it actually does bounce. But the vanilla renderer is so bad, you can't tell. That's a really big problem, and I hope they address that if they were to rework minecarts in the future. Next up is a really frustrating bug that's been in the game since if I recall correctly, it's been in the game since about 1.5, around when minecarts were introduced. It's been in the game for a very long time and gone unaddressed. So if I cut it off real quick, you'll see in one direction, if I place a cart here, they collide on parallel lines and will make this minecart move. But in the other direction, it doesn't do that at all. The reason for that is because of the orientation that the minecart faces whenever it's placed onto a rail. And in two of the directions, the hitbox will collide with the minecarts next to them. It's incredibly frustrating because it makes a lot of systems either unreliable or uh, non-functional at all. It's such a minor thing, but it's incredibly frustrating to work with. In fact, I would rather this just not work in any direction, personally. Like, if it was just broken in all directions, that would make me feel better about it than having it work in two directions, but not the other two. I mean, obviously, I don't. I would prefer it works in all directions, but just having that consistency means a lot more to me than uh, what we have currently. Because right now it doesn't make any sense, and it's really really infuriating. Now, once again, there's a fix in the Minecarts mod, and so you can employ these mods to fix it, but this should be vanilla gameplay. This shouldn't be necessary. So next thing on the list, this is getting a little bit a little more specific, and would definitely require a lot more thinking and brainstorming on Mojang's part, in terms of how to implement or maybe adding more features and that kind of thing. But one of the things I would really like to see would be TNT minecarts getting more consistency. Right now, if you cut them on, if you light them with an activator rail, it has an 80 game tick fuse time like normal TNT, and then has a normal explosion like TNT. But if you drop it off of a rail, it has no fuse, and it has a random power larger explosion depending on the fall distance. Like, that alone is just something that is incredibly confusing, right? Uh, and it's strictly random. There's How are you supposed to design a system around something that's random? You really can't. At least not reliably, I should say. You, of course, you can do something like that, but it's not reliable. Um, and then you have this other niche mechanic of, if it's lit with an activator rail or has a fuse timer, or because it was lit by a player or whatever, it won't break rails uh, that are supported by blocks. It won't break the rails or the blocks. But if it uh, has no fuse and just collides with something like so, it'll break all the rails and the blocks. That that doesn't make any sense. That's very inconsistent behavior. This is something that I think should be changed. Um, Now there is once again a fix for the rail explosion issue and in Mended Minecarts, but it doesn't really fix the whole weirdness of the behavior in the first place, in terms of random explosions and things along those lines. It just doesn't make sense. I think it should be very consistent how large their explosions are, um, what they explode. I like the mechanic of not blowing up rails, but it should be consistent. So next thing on the list is a complete furnace cart rework. Right now, ever since 1.17, when they added waterlogged rails, pretty much every single use that you can think of for a furnace minecart can be done better by something else in the game. That could be um, the increasing slowdown rate from hopper mine carts, or waterlogged rails slowing down carts, or trapdoors to make mine carts bounce on the trapdoor instead of a furnace cart. I've tried thinking of ways to use furnace carts, and I've come up dry when it comes to something that a furnace cart legitimately does better than some other current mechanic in the game. Um, if you guys have suggestions, leave comments down below. I would love to hear them, because obviously there could be something I've missed, but I haven't found anything. I would rather them just work like normal furnaces. I think that would be really cool, especially if we're not going to get movable tile entities anytime soon. I don't know. I would really like to see a complete furnace cart rework. So now let's talk about some things I don't want changed. Um, if these things were to be changed, it would be quite devastating. Obviously, technical Minecraft and myself get would work around it, but I think these enhance Minecart tech as is. So the first thing is Minecart snapping or clipping into blocks. I really love this mechanic. It is so fun to work with. Yes, it's a little bit unintuitive, I admit, but it's kind of like QC in my opinion, in how, yes, it's not intuitive, but the nature of the mechanic allows for so much utility. It's it would be a shame to change this, in my opinion. Next thing would be rail placements. They've been doing improvements in the most recent versions. I really like where rail placements are at. I think there's a lot of cool things you could do with them. Hexatron and I have discovered a lot, and I think they're really fun. So I would be I think it would be a great loss if this were to be removed in some capacity. And then finally, messing with piston bolts. If we increase the speed, the need for piston bolts goes away. Maybe not entirely, depends on how they implement it, but um, I think piston bolts are still a very cool mechanic, and things that would mess with this um, would probably come at a very large cost and upset a lot of players and tech servers. So I would like it if they could leave piston bolts alone, unless they were to change the way that minecart speed functions, and then the need for piston bolts in themselves would be somewhat obsolete and just left up to the players to use. So with that all out of the way, I think that is all I have for today's video. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you guys have any suggestions, or um, if any of this surprised you, or if you agree, please let me know down in the comments. I would love to discuss this further. Um, and we are getting really close to 1,000 subscribers. So everybody, please like, comment, subscribe, and thank you so much for the support. Bye bye.